Did you seriously bring me almond milk? I said. Oat milk. Oat. Do your ears not work, or is that just your resume? The voice cracked through the air like a whip bouncing off the polished marble of the 42nd floor lobby. Heads turned, snickers floated through the air. I stood there, plain flat, second-hand cardigan hair yanked into a low ponytail, pretending I didn't hear the laughter behind me. Sorry, I whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to catch. Nobody knew my name. Nobody cared. And that's exactly how I planned it. Because the same woman getting humiliated for bringing the wrong coffee was the brand new CEO of Calder and Easton Real Estate Tech, a billion-dollar empire towering over Manhattan. For the past 3 days, I'd been living undercover as a temp. No private elevator, no corner office, no armor. Just me, a fake ID badge that said HR rotation, and a plan to see how this company really treated people when they thought you were no one. By noon, I'd been insulted 3 more times, handed a stack of meaningless reports to staple, and mistaken for a delivery girl. I ducked into the janitor's closet to breathe, wondering if I'd made a mistake doing this. And that's when I heard a soft rustle behind me. Rough morning. He was leaning against the sink. Sleeves rolled up, boots dusted with gray, and eyes that carried more weight than the entire building. He wasn't startled to see me. He wasn't awkward, just calm, steady. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He reached for something on the table and handed it to me. It was a small paper crane, perfectly folded from a napkin, delicate and crooked at the edges. Made this for my kid, he said with a shrug. But maybe you need it more right now. I blinked, caught off guard. You made this just something to keep my hands busy while I wait for the floor to dry. I smiled for the first time that day. I'm Mara, I said, giving him my undercover name. Gabe, he replied, shaking my hand with calloused fingers. Well, just Mara. This closet's always got bad coffee and quiet corners if you need it. Before I could say anything back, his radio crackled and he was gone, disappearing into the hallway like he was never there. That night, curiosity got the better of me. In my small rental apartment, I opened his personnel file. Former NASA engineer. 14 patents. 7 years of unexplained silence in his work history. Single parent. Emergency contact his daughter Lila. I stared at that paper crane for a long time. I'd come here to test my staff. But something about Gabe made me wonder if I was the one being tested. The next day I saw him in the break room. Not cleaning, not fixing anything, just kneeling beside a little girl sitting on the floor near his mop bucket. She was tiny. Her shoes mismatched her fingers, fidgeting with the hem of her dress. When the vending machine buzzed, she flinched so hard she curled in on herself. Gabe crouched beside her, speaking in a low voice I couldn't quite hear. He pulled out a bubble wand, dipped it in, and blew. 1 bubble, 2, 3. The girl's breathing slowed as she tracked them, floating under the fluorescent light. Better, he whispered. She nodded. My throat tightened. Something about that scene, the janitor, the little girl, the quiet power of bubbles, hit me harder than any boardroom speech ever had. Later that night, I dug deeper. Lila was 7. Diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. Gabe had left NASA to raise her alone. No scandal, no failure, just love. The kind that sacrifices everything without making a sound. And that's when my plans stopped feeling like a social experiment and started feeling like I was standing on holy ground. The next day, an elevator jammed between floors with me, Gabe, and Lila trapped inside. The lights flickered, buzzing like angry wasps. Lila froze, covering her ears, rocking back and forth. Gabe reached for the bubble wand. Nothing. He'd left it behind. I forgot it. He whispered, his voice cracking. Baby, I'm sorry. I forgot the wand. I didn't even think. I tore the lid off my iced coffee, dipped the straw in the melting ice water, and blew. A bubble floated up. Then another. And another. Lila's rocking slowed. She reached out, caught one on her fingertip, and looked at me like I'd just handed her a lifeline. See? I whispered, cross-legged on the elevator floor in my plain slacks and messy bun. It's just us. Nothing scary about that. Gabe's eyes glistened. You just turned a panic attack into a tea party, he murmured. By the time the doors opened, something had shifted between us, but not everyone was impressed. Later, I watched as a senior VP named Crane bumped into Gabe outside HR, sending his resume fluttering to the floor. Oops, Crane said, smirking. Didn't realize janitors had resumes. He walked away without looking back. I knelt to pick it up. Paperclipped to it was a hand-drawn schematic labeled Project Harmony. It wasn't a toy. It was a revolutionary sensory patch that could detect a child's overstimulation and calm them in real time. And this man was mopping floors. That night I couldn't sleep. The company I'd sworn to lead was blind. Blind to talent. Blind to humanity. Blind to people like Gabe. So I made a decision. At the annual gala, I walked in wearing a midnight blue gown, my real name announced over the microphone, Mara Kingsley, CEO of Calder and Easton. The whispers rippled through the crowd as employees realized the temp they'd been dismissing all week was their boss. Gabe stood near the back in an ill-fitting blazer, Lila holding his hand. Crane sneered loud enough for the room to hear. You brought the janitor. What's next? Letting interns run the keynote. Lila let go of her dad's hand, walked straight to the microphone, and with her little voice trembling but clear said, She's family now. The entire ballroom froze. She listens like Daddy does. Lila continued. She makes me feel safe. She's home. Not a single person laughed. Crane's smirk vanished. I stepped forward. Tonight was supposed to be about innovation. I said, my voice calm but sharp. But maybe the real innovation is empathy. Applause started slow, then thundered through the room. Later on the rooftop terrace, Gabe confronted me. You put her in that room, he said quietly, his voice cracking. She's 7, Mara. I didn't know she'd speak, I whispered. I wasn't trying to use her. She called you home, he said, tears in his eyes. And you let her walk into a storm just to prove a point. I'd faced hostile investors, corrupt board members, and media scandals. But those words shattered me. Tell me what you need, I said finally. I need a world where she doesn't have to be brave just to exist. The next morning, I stood before the boardroom with Lila's crayon drawing pinned to my chest like armor. We've forgotten why this company exists, I said. We worship numbers and titles and ignore the people who hold us up. I unveiled Gabe's invention. This is Project Harmony. It could change millions of lives. And you ignored it because its inventor was wearing coveralls instead of cufflinks. The board scoffed. The COO leaned back in his leather chair. If you're so confident, find funding. 72 hours. Otherwise, we're shelving this project and your little redemption tour. I didn't flinch. Deal. 3 days later, we stood in front of Vanguard Angel Capital. Gabe's hands shook as he spoke. This doesn't cure her condition, he said, voice low but steady. It just tells her she's safe when the world gets too loud. It tells her what no one else could, not even me. He pulled out the bubble wand and played a short video of Lila wearing the patch in a grocery store, calming herself under buzzing lights. The investors were silent. Then one man said softly, My nephew hasn't been inside a mall in 2 years. We walked out with a signed $25 million funding deal. Gabe stood frozen on the sidewalk. Did he really say yes? He said, absolutely, I whispered. That was the day Gabe became Director of Therapeutic Innovation. The janitor badge was gone, replaced with a title he'd earned years ago. But the first thing he did wasn't celebrate. He cleaned the marble lobby floors, humming softly, making sure every streak was gone. Why are you still mopping? I teased. If my kid's gonna roll around on this floor, he said, I want it spotless. Within months, sensory safe rooms were installed on every floor of the building. And one evening I found myself barefoot on a foam mat, watching Lila blow bubbles while Gabe tightened a bolt on the wall. You're not afraid I'll test you again? I asked softly. Test away, he said with a smile. I've mopped tougher messes. I laughed, and it felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. Weeks later, we sat under an old oak tree in Central Park. Me barefoot in a simple dress, Gabe folding paper cranes, Lila curled between us. She pointed at a bubble drifting upward. That one's a heart, she whispered. I tilted my head. Looks like a circle. No, she said firmly. Look again. And she was right. It was imperfect, wobbly, but definitely a heart. Gabe handed me a paper crane. This one's for you, he said softly. Because you've been carrying broken things for too long. Thought maybe you deserved something light. I stared at it, tears pricking my eyes. I'm not fixed, Gabe, I whispered. No, he said gently. You're seen. That's when I realized this wasn't about experiments or boardrooms or headlines. It was about a janitor who once built machines for Mars, but chose to build a safe world for his daughter instead. About a little girl who turned panic attacks into tea parties. About a woman who stopped pretending and started listening. And maybe that's all any of us want. Not perfection, not power. Just someone who sees us even when we're sweeping floors or folding paper cranes out of broken days. So now I'll ask you, would you have seen him? Or would you have walked past like everyone else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you've ever underestimated someone who changed your life. And if this story hit your heart, share it because the world needs more people like Gabe, more little girls like Lila, and maybe a few more CEOs who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty.